roll right in. Who knows? Who knows? This is one of those episodes where you just don't know what's going to happen. What's up, Isaac?
It's the best kind, man. I come here for the adventure, for the mystery.
Yeah. So what's up, PartnerUp? We're back. And I think this is our first ever three-peat on a guest. Am I not mistaken? I know I'm not mistaken because
the triple crown.
Yeah, the hat trick.
Not even Jay McBain, really? Not even him?
Yeah. He beat Jay, which I'm not going to stoke those fires, Allan. No, thank you.
Oh man, I got into trouble last time I did that.
We got Allan Adler back on the podcast, people. This is going to be a fun one because I'm super excited about this topic. That there's been some conversations happening behind the scenes and some publication of content that's happened on Partner Hacker, and Allan's been prototyping on what the heck is happening in the world with how do we move past the funnel. And then Isaac wrote a great article, and then we're all trying to wrap our minds around all this. And Allan was like, we need to do a podcast on this. And I'm like, I completely agree.
Well,
we have to. So that's where we're going to start from that general premise today, but I don't want to just jump right in. That's too fast for PartnerUp. Isaac, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, yeah. So let me, this is kind of how I'm thinking about this topic is the concept of an ecosystem is phenomenal. It works. It's hitting, it's landing, even though there's still question around what is it. It's kind of a big phrase, a big concept. And maybe it's easy to get away with being nebulous and not being specific enough. But generally speaking, that concept, using the ecosystem idea, is superior to sort of the previous, go to market, right? And Allan, you go to ecosystem is your baby, is your thing. That seems to work. When it comes to translating that into a visualization of some kind, that's what I'm really interested in, is why is it so hard to visualize in a way that's useful? And what happens if you can't? What tends to happen is we revert to things that are easy to visualize and easy to measure and attribute. And so you end up kind of talking about ecosystems, but when you go into your organizational meetings and planning, you end up just reverting back to a picture of a funnel with data that can be easily measured in it. And so you're what you're doing in the day-to-day isn't matching up to what you're aspiring to with all this funnel talk. And I want to figure out how we fix that.
And when I would actually add as a front bookend for this one is you've got relationships on one side with partners, customers, and communities, and you have transactions on another side. And I think what you just said translates into this thing over here, this transaction thing. We can actually put metrics on that because we know what it is. We know how to count it. It's observable. It's like the difference between dark social and content capture, right? Content capture, dark social, all the values created in dark social, and then we capture the demand and we say that's the important thing. It's the same problem that is everywhere, right? Relationship, transaction. And that's why I sort of iterated on a funnel, the new relationship first engagement model as a way to replace the funnel, because the funnel has got there's a zero relationship in it. It's relationshipless.
It's funny. It's funny. I'm thinking out loud here, and that's what we're doing here. We're prototyping. We're playing around with these ideas. So don't hold me to anything too tight.
That's what I want to applaud too. There needs to be more of these convos because we don't get to the future state by fighting the same battle in the funnel of here's the go-to-market operating model in the funnel in the spreadsheet. Partner, tell me how you fit into this world. And it's what if that world I don't fit into? So we have to do this, and that's why I wanted to do this.
Yeah. Another metaphor I love is the funnel is clearly looking through the rearview mirror with perfect clarity. If I have a rearview mirror, it's glass. It's just my BMW's just got clean windows in the back and clean reflections. I can see perfectly. And then the front mirror is littered with all this crap. And I can kind of see the future out there, but it's very murky. And people say, well, I can really see the rearview mirror really terrifically well. I'm going to keep driving that way, as opposed to oh, no, we have to experiment with the murky window that's the front-facing view. The puck is going this way.
Yeah.
It's not going back.
Well, and it's almost okay, so I've had this experience before where I'm a big Detroit Lions fan, which is a really depressing thing in and of itself, but where if I can't watch a game, I'm on this little sports app and I'm watching, and what the app does is, besides just show you the statistics, it will say in text format the play that just happened, and it shows you this little picture of a field, and it will show, you know, little where the ball's supposed to be, and then it will say, like, you know, 10-yard pass, the ball moves. And you could sort of visualize an entire football game. Hey guys, look, we can see every step how we moved the ball down the field and how we got into the end zone and where we struggled. And, you know, oh, look, on third down, we kept getting stuck at midfield. You could see that and say, well, let's learn everything we can about how to win the next football game by looking at this. Now, if you're a fan of football and you watch it, you know that, like, yeah, that's true. That tells you some usable things about the game. But if you're actually watching it on TV, what happens in that 2-minute gap between one play and the next when it shows the ball move is like a guy on the sideline got in a fight with another guy on the sideline, and the coach called timeout, and somebody gave an impassioned speech, and all of a sudden they went out there and completely changed what they were doing based on some emotional connection. Or there's a momentum swing in the game, like a turnover changes, and all of a sudden the team feels like they're losing, and you can almost just feel that things are not going their way for this next quarter, and they're going to have to somehow survive. Like, it's almost like bad luck. It's like a thing, right? And if you're watching the game, you know that those were the turning points in the game. The X's and O's were like the last step, the result of something that was happening that can't really be measured or expressed in a diagram. And like, that's what keeps popping in my mind.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, you could actually apply a lagging indicator analysis to that same analysis, right? The little X's and O's are lagging indicators. They tell you nothing about what's going to happen. They just told you what happened. Somewhat like closed won. Those are lagging indicators. Anybody who's managing their business as closed won is already out of business. They just haven't received the memo, right? It's like you got to be in the moment. The leading indicators are what you saw that's going to influence the lagging indicators, and they'll show up in the X's and the O's in the next screen or the next screen after that, which is one of the reasons the funnel is so fucked. Excuse me, my French, because it's focusing on transactions. Your experience was relational. When you went to the little X's and O's, it was transactional. So it's, I don't know if that metaphor, if that is a useful frame.
I mean, the tagline for Partner Hacker is "Trust is the new data." And what I meant by that is that, not that data doesn't matter. What I meant by that is that the data points, there is like almost data that connects those data points. Like there's an N, right? There's a variable that is not currently measured that is like, what is the strength between X and Y, which is this new delta of Z, right? There's this strength between A and B, which is this new delta of C. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And that's the relationship. Like, it is the strength of that node. It's not that the node exists, right? It's an X, Y, and Z axis.
Right.
It's a new way of thinking about things, because the way that go-to-market teams typically, I mean, actually, here's a perfect analogy. It's actually, if you think about the go-to-market old funnel, you used to think in terms of like the waterfall of, you know, awareness, you know, interest, decision, action, or like whatever framework for marketing to sales. You would have targeted accounts. You would have these people that then enter your website, and then there was some decision where they downloaded an ebook or they signed up for a demo, and they enter your sales pipeline. Then all of a sudden B2B got obsessed with what? Intent data. Now, intent data wasn't any new data to anything that existed. It was accounts, and it was contacts, and it was related to your company and your category, but there was this new variable of like interest, intent. That was mildly disruptive to B2B. This new thing that we're talking about, the strength of those relationships, that's extremely disruptive, because not all data is equal at that point. And I think that's what you're unpacking, Allan, really well. And Isaac, is like, there is this new variable that sits between the data points that isn't relational. It's almost like graph data. Like if you think about all data as living in a SQL table, right? So SQL is just like variables. It's tables and data sets. A graph data blows that all apart, right? Like if you know SQL, that doesn't mean you know graph. In this world, we're almost dealing with a graph.
Yeah. You also think you can also look at the funnel in terms of its limitations as being, when does something become a marketing qualified lead in relationship to the customer's intent? So let's put intent and MQL, SQL, close one into a context. And I would argue that one of the big problems with the funnel is it doesn't really capture the customer at the right place. So an example would be like, let's say that like a system integrator is talking to an enterprise customer 6 months before there's even an RFP for said software product, right? That 6 month that preceded it will determine who will win that RFP, which of the vendors will win it. But that doesn't even show up in the fucking funnel because it's too early. It's not properly qualified. It doesn't, the intent data doesn't say I'm about to buy ERP, right? It says I'm about to buy a big project from Accenture. And so we could even look at this context of like the funnel without the ecosystem is kind of like breakfast with no juice or eggs. It's like you got to have everything in there. You got to have the ecosystem that preceded the qualification of your deal in your funnel. Otherwise, your funnel is broken because the intent data is too late. You're almost like way too past the point of intent.
Yeah, it's like, how do you generate intent or influence, right? Like, if you're thinking about, oh, I want to listen to intent, but I'm not in control of it, right? Like, if you're an intent marketer, and you're like, intent data is amazing, but you're not interested in controlling intent, you don't get it, right? Like, the intent exists out there. It's like rearview mirror, right? It's like, oh, there's intent out there, so I want to market to that intent. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Like, of course you would want to market to that intent, but how do you create it? How do you manifest that influence? That's an entirely different thing.
Right, exactly.
Oh, we got Allan pulling up the screen share right now. But
remember, I wrote this cool article in this really great. Have you subscribed for Partner Hacker yet? Because it's awesome.
I was literally just looking at this picture as you were talking, and I was going to bring it up. So I'm glad you did.
Awesome. So there's two dimensions. That when we looked at the continuum of the customer, community, and partner. By the way, one of the first things we need to fix in the funnel is stop treating the funnel as just for customers. That's a mistake, right? If there is going to be any kind of replace the funnel, you should replace the funnel with all the things that you need to drive commitment with. You need to drive commitment with customers, commitment with community, commitment with partners. As you say, accounts, individuals, and customers, right? All of these people need to get committed to you, because if they don't, you're not going to get any kind of flywheel, right? One of the ways that you get flywheels is you get many different kinds of people committed to you, and then you start having these interactions. The partner loves you, and then the customers come because the partners are there, and the community comes because the partner and the community or customer are there. That's commitment. So that's number one, is like, let's stop talking about the funnel with just customers.
Let's pause right there, Allan. Let's pause right there, because I think you might have, maybe this is the answer, maybe it's not. When I was saying, what is this new variable, this N, the A, B to the C or the X, Y to the Z, do you think commitment is that ordinal, meaning it's hard to measure on what scale of 1 to 10, but it's like less than, greater than, right? Like it moves in one direction or the other. Do you think that commitment, trust, like is in this image right here, are you saying that's the variable that we need to try and measure?
That's the lagging indicator.
That's the lagging indicator, not a leading indicator.
It's the closed one. It's the closed one. Commitment is the new closed one. If you really think about it, right, when a customer buys a piece of software, they're not done. They're just committed to a certain level. It's a stage. It's the beginning rather than, it's the middle, certainly not the beginning or the end. And then after that, you move to advocacy
or churn, right? If the commitment goes down, then you might be like, I'm not doing this.
Exactly. Right. But if you go from I'm interested, I'm going to check it out, to I get committed, to start driving adoption, that part of the funnel actually isn't broken, because it's looking, if we look at it instead of at transactional level, at a relationship level, how committed is this relationship to my company? Full stop. That's the question we want to be asking, right? How committed is this relationship with a customer, with a partner, with an ecosystem? And then once we achieve some level of commitment, then we can start driving adoption, joint value creation, and advocacy. So that part of the funnel is not broken, but that's only one dimension. The other dimension is all the dark social stuff that happens around that commitment that we actually can orchestrate. So on one side, we have ecosystems that create influence for us. On the other side, we have our created influence, which brings us really early in the funnel, well before an MQL in a traditional sense. So that's why this somewhat, conceptual model was intended to sort of depict these two dimensions. One is how committed am I, and the other is how am I driving that influence across the entire cycle, recognizing that customers don't want to buy products, they want to buy
Allan, I'm really curious as I'm looking at this influence continuum, and I'm imagining some way to plot influence versus attributability, and how those are sometimes at odds, right? Some of the most influential activities are the least attributable. And I'm thinking about, like, as Jared was talking about, the okay, we got to, get people to, let's say, download a PDF. Okay, we got to get people to download it because then we have their lead. That's a lead. It's measurable. I can look at that and I can say my marketing team drove this lead versus, hey, we have a podcast. We have listeners. We can kind of get data on that, but we don't know what that means because we don't capture anything about them. We just know it was listened to. So that's devalued. And what's interesting is once you hit a certain size, like the long end, the fat end of the tail, everyone can kind of know. Like if I said to you, what's more important, that, your podcast has 1 million people listening or millions of people, that you're up at, the top podcaster level, or that you have some PDF that gets, thousands of leads. They're going to say, oh, well, obviously having that podcast. But anything below those absolute top tier levels of influence that are like obvious household name,
It's true.
tend to, I think, get undervalued tremendously because people don't know what to do with them. They're like, so what? You have a podcast. Where are the
100%.
leads?
But let's ground ourselves on some realities that have nothing to do with the ecosystem. Number one reality is that a vast proportion of all demand generation happens in dark social. I'm not making that up. Everybody agrees with that, right? And we know that we have shit ton top difficulty tracking it. We know it. And that which we track is usually what's called demand capture, which happens after demand generation. So if 95% of the activity is already happening in dark social, we're inheriting a broken system from day one. From day one, this canonical funnel is seriously messed up from an attribution perspective. And anybody who wants to argue that is like, I don't know why they're doing it. So there's one argument to be made that this influence dimension of having an ecosystem create influence actually improves on that, because although it's very difficult to track dark social, it's less difficult to track dark social when it's happening in an ecosystem, especially if one of those ecosystems is a partner with whom you already have attribution. So an example of that is like if we partner together, Jared, you and I partner together with two software companies, and you create demand through your influence channel, right? I can at least attribute that to my integrated partner and tie it to a better together story that we created. That's a lot easier than if some community member floating around does something and I have zero attribution. So we can actually improve on this through the ecosystem.
I think so. And I think there's this is where we can like shout out to our own like partner tech world and community. Like there's some cool companies out there that are solving this, and this isn't sponsored or anything. Like I was just taking a look at Everflow.io today, Allan. I don't know if you've taken a look at the product. What was so interesting to me was all of the different parameters and ways that you could associate activity back to some partner, just not for saying this is the reason this person signed up. Like why affiliate world, channel world, old world is so backwards is that they try to approach everything. And then where is Chris Walker? So you're saying dark social, Allan, and then there's the old world of affiliate, like one link, one click, one purchase. Okay, there's dark social on one spectrum, and then there's this other one link, one click, one purchase on the other. Dark social is like this amorphous thing that, Chris Walker on LinkedIn, God bless him, because I actually love his content, but he's also demystifying it and shrouding it in like all of this mystery by calling it dark social. It's not that. There is some in between where there's like Everflow, where if someone, you refer into your partner's funnel or you influence into your partner's funnel some contact, but it's not for a transaction. It's for awareness. Like I bring someone to you through a virtual event and they become a subscriber to your communications. And then you influence them for 90 days through your communications, and then they become a customer. Wait, you're going to tell me that I didn't have anything to do with that? Screw you. They didn't even care about you at all prior to me putting them in your world. I'm not saying that I deserve 100% commission, but how could we ignore the fact that they came to you through our communication?
That's an EQL, dude. And that was the first funnel I created before going off the reservation and doing this ridiculous conceptual model was just putting EQL on top of MQL and calling it good.
Yeah,
that was baling wire and duct tape.
Well, this is really interesting to me because I'm so many things that I've been, learning, being immersed in the partnerships world, have me looking back on previous experiences through different lenses. So the first company that I founded, Praxis, is like a boot camp for young people, right? And so they're making a commitment for a year-long program. They're paying like $12,000. This is a really big deal. It's a big lifestyle thing. Many of them are doing it instead of college, so they have all this social pressure. So we would find this weird thing where like influencers, podcasters, especially newsletter people that our audience listened to, were really influential, but we didn't have a way. A lot of them didn't even have very big audiences. They were niche. So we didn't have an easy way to work with them because they would say, well, let's do an affiliate thing, or we would. Okay, great. We'll pay you $1,000 for every one of these that becomes a student. It almost never worked because they would listen to the podcast. Then they would go talk about it with their friends or parents. Maybe they would come on our site and do some stuff. This would last for like a year. They'd be thinking about us for a year before they made the decision. And when they made the decision, we often wouldn't find out until after they were in the program, where they'd be talking and saying, I think the first time I heard about this was Isaac was on this podcast one time. And we would have no way. The lag was so long. There were so many other touch points. So doing like direct referral payments didn't work, but paying just for like, okay, here, let's pay for an ad spot, that seemed too nebulous to us because we don't know the return we're going to get. And figuring out something in between there to say, I want to capture some level of influence that's short of a transaction, but that's more than just an impression. Like that's to me the magic sauce.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's definitely a whether you call it dork social or any form of sort of, harder to attribute aspect. You can almost look at it from the standpoint of like a transaction, like you mentioned. How much value came from that webcast, from that one webcast, versus a campaign? And maybe the way to do it is to move more to a campaign model, to say, if we campaign on a topic and then we look at the value of that campaigning period, and we look at the activities and we compare and contrast the value of that, because there's a certain amount of mass influence that you need to create value. If you just influence, like think of it from a social media perspective, like if I wrote one time every month, I would have no influence. But I write every single day, so I have a load of influence. So hopefully I don't say dumb things, right?
Oh,
Jared
I will
tell
call
me
you
if I
out
say
every
something
single time.
And then I'll say, well, oh, and then I'll say, yeah, but what you said was dumb too. And then we get people to laugh.
Well,
Jay and I did one of those. That was crazy. But anyways, the where I'm going with that is that as we think about influence's role in the funnel, bringing this back to the top, right? And we think about the ecosystem's influence in the funnel. I think we have to get to something more than a transactional influence event, like I did a webcast, and something more than we've been partnering for 4 years together and we've done 78 webcasts. There needs to be some measurable period or zone, maybe call it campaigning, influence campaigning, that we can actually use as a way to measure, real true significant change. I don't know if that's a good way to think about it, but we do need to solve for the attribution and measurement issue, or we'll just continue to look in the rearview mirror.
Well, what's so interesting too, though, like Isaac, you said this before, and I'm forgetting where the model came from, but like the map is not the territory.
Yeah.
Tying this all together, like where does the rubber meet the road? The rubber meets the road in that, this is my opinion. My opinion is that we like to treat the world as machines, as humans. Machines we're in control of. Systems we're less in control of. Machines have a finite number of ways to reach the outcome. Systems have an innumerate, it's equifinality, right? An innumerate number of ways to reach the end outcome. So whenever we're sitting down and planning for our business, we treat it like a machine. There's an operating model, there's inputs, and there's outputs, right? And what do we do in business whenever we're building that operating plan? We create scenarios, right? The board plan, the team plan, the best case, and the worst case. Whereas in a systems thinking approach is like everything's a scenario. Everything is. Like it's probabilistic thinking versus outcome thinking. And if you think about the map is not the territory, it's like, okay, here's what we generally think of our business. That's the operating model. And a funnel is a permutation of that. A flywheel, if we're to call out our buddy Avanish Sahai and HubSpot and what Brian Halligan and Mark Killens, and they rolled out to the world, the customer flywheel versus the funnel. No matter what we do, maybe it's imperfect because it's not a machine that we control. It's these interdependent and independent actors that as the more that they collaborate, the more the outcome changes, perhaps in our favor, perhaps not in our favor. So is this, like, part of me is like, this seems so in vain to try and define this new world through like the lens of something that's like, it's not apples and oranges is kind of my point. Apples and oranges, those are both fruit. We're not even talking about the same category of stuff. We're talking about new. Yeah. It's like as if there was a new food group being entered into the pyramid. Does the food pyramid still work? Well, it's kind of like an apple. It's kind of like a sugar. It's kind of like a starch. It's kind of like the, no, it's none of those things. The pyramid needs to be exploded.
Yeah. Well, we could also relate this to parts and a whole. Like if I'm a technology company, I'm a part of a whole solution. No, very few technology companies, even I would argue Salesforce, HubSpot, Atlassian, the big giants, right, could really call themselves the complete tech stack of a company. They're not, right? They're part of a whole. And if you're a small or medium-sized tech stack, you're probably part of one of those or a part of that whole that caused the HubSpot universe or the Salesforce universe. Is whenever we look at a funnel, increasingly as we become interdependent and have all these tech partnerships and all these channel partnerships, we're looking at a incomplete part of the whole. It would literally be like trying to calculate the value of the wheels on the car that got sold without considering how the wheels got on the car. Well, in the dealership, well before they got there. So if we think ecosystematically, I mean, maybe even kind of to keep the concept of an ecosystem funnel, which is kind of a more interesting analysis than an individual parts funnel, then we might be able to deal with some of those complexities in a more elegant way, because then we could at least look at the interdependencies systematically rather than looking at our little piece of the puzzle. Because this is the biggest problem, I think, of the funnel, is the funnel looks at things inside four walls that are no longer gated.
Okay, so
those walls are
is
down,
this too much of a stretch
right?
to equate the funnel and go to market to like a SQL table or inputs, outputs, or a machine versus an ecosystem approach to a graph? And here's what I mean by that.
It's like a network graph,
Right. Yeah. It is in a network graph. Like, for example, Allan, whenever Dave Gerhardt posts on LinkedIn, or Chris Walker, or our good buddy Joe Rowley, and their posts go viral, why do their posts go viral and not, yours or mine? Right. Why not yours? I mean, ours go viral in that we hit, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, views. Like, okay, cool. We went viral, but like theirs get 500,000, 1 million, 5 million, like it's
network graph. Exactly what Isaac said. Exactly what he said.
The strength of their relationship with their viewers is stronger than ours. True or false? And it's like, well, we want to think that ours is. Like, of course ours is, but then you look at Chris Walker's track record or Jill Rowley's track record or Dave Gerhardt's track record. No, they've been working their network for freaking 10 years, putting out beautifully consistent, amazing content, challenging the status quo in a novel way that's simple. It's like the trust that they have with their audience is extremely high. And so they're
super, super goods.
Right. But what they're doing though, is they're not like, LinkedIn's not placing a bet and being like, okay, so Jill Rowley's going to post X amount of times, or Chris Walker's going to post X amount of times, and then Y is going to happen, then Z is going to happen. And then guess what? Here's our revenue output by people posting on LinkedIn.
It's totally organic.
Exactly. So the network graph is like, they're committed to the graph. And it's like all of our bets are on the graph. And then we know that net, the emergent properties from that graph will beat out anything that we could design, which is the funnel. A funnel is a design or an orchestrated, or I'm in control. I'm in my ivory tower. I'm waving my orchestra wand and voila, $40 million, $400 million versus, hey, you have no idea, but we're committed to this. Hey, look what happened.
Well, you can, it helps you start to think maybe more long-term about your play. So if you imagine that, network graph and or like synapses in the brain, whatever, you are a node, right?
Right.
And all you have control over is what's in your node and what you put out to other nodes, right? And so you can send something across that connection to those other nodes, And if you're sending them shit, they're going to fall off the network. They're going to disconnect. And when they do, you don't just lose them. You lose all the other nodes they're connected to, and them, and them, and them, right? So you need to think about that. But conversely, if you're sending stuff to a dead node that's never sending anything back to you, right? Like in biology, what would happen? You would want to cut that one off because they're going to siphon a lot of energy away, right? They're taking, you don't keep sending stuff down a pathway that just keeps dead ending. So like thinking about, and I mean, it sounds like this weird karma type thing, right? Like I just got to like keep putting out good and then it will make its way back to me somehow. But truly in like a biological sense or a network graph sense, that is true. That is how social media works. That is how many elements of biology work. Like you have the ability to send across these channels things to these nodes, and to the extent that you are strengthening those nodes, strengthening those connections, they are going to now bring in the nodes that they're connected with and expand your overall influence over the ecosystem. But that's just being really deliberate about what you put out there, even when there's not a transaction involved.
Exactly. So, on the left side of my model, I had, ecosystem influence. And I think that one of the key questions I would ask to anybody that's challenging the funnel is, what is the power and value of the ecosystem influence that I have? Because I take it as a given that if I get Jill Rowley to want to promote me, I am going to get some of the benefits of her network effect, of her network graph, right? That's the whole idea. But like we connect ourselves to people who have more influence than us. We become friends with them. We do kindnesses to them. We care about them. Then they in turn care about us, and our network graph increases. That's how it works. That's how you get broader network effects, right? Or broader network graphs. So I don't think that anybody looking at the funnel is measuring the relationship between the size and influence of their ecosystem influence. Like how much ecosystem influence, by the way, which ecosystem? The one your customer cares about. Don't give a shit about your ecosystem, right? How much influence over my customer's ecosystem do I have? Thereby, how much is my customer's ecosystem helping me? There's probably no greater data point in any universe that contributes to whatever funnel you want to talk about than that variable alone. And although that's a little hard to measure, it's an awfully great thing to go cultivate. And anybody, if you look at anybody who's coming up, Jerry, you're the master, right, of doing ninja numbers on big giant partners as a little tiny squat company and getting them to treat you as partner of the year. This is a perfect example of that, right? You turned HubSpot, when you were PandaDoc, I don't know if that's the right combo, but one of those two, into a giant influencer for you, and then you became partner of the year. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? How do you get the influencer of your customer to influence on your behalf? Period. That's the big input to the funnel. And any CRO who doesn't know that is not talking to customers. It's not talking to the ecosystem.
I think I completely agree. I think this is how much we're geeking out right now, folks, for y'all listening in and like following this convo, because if you're on a run right now and you're following Allan Adler and Isaac geeking out, like kudos to you. You are a heck of a human being. Because this is like some mind-bending topics that like we need to be able to go to the boardroom and influence our investors and our executives on, because asking the question, Allan, that you started with the beginning of your convo, like what is the power of your ecosystem influence? This is where B2B and the operating model and the funnel tries to reduce the answer to that question to a digit, right? A number, a numeric value. And a numeric value goes, okay, well, can I measure that on a 1 to 10? And what I would say is no, you cannot. You cannot measure that on a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 100 or a 1 to 1,000 scale. I think you could measure, like my answer to that question would be like, okay, let's get the right scale. And the scale isn't Isaac. Like we're literally chatting about this while we're talking live. But Allan, Isaac, and me. Like I have multiple chat streams going on. I was like, is it ordinal versus decimal? And then Isaac's like, no, is it ordinal versus cardinal? And what I would pose back to the audience and to you, Allan and Isaac, is I'm not sure the answer to that question, but here's what I would say. To me, it's on the scale of horrible to incredible. So what's the value of or power of my ecosystem influence? Horrible to incredible. To me, that's ordinal. Like It's somewhere in this worldview, and I can't put a number on it, but like whatever the heck the Supreme Court said on whatever ruling, you know it when you see it. When it's incredible, you know it. And when it's horrible, you know it. The second you try to put a digit on it, everything breaks.
This is the big insight, I think, in economics.
Yes.
That like really early on made me like reject most sort of utilitarian attempts to do economics. It's the difference between ordinal and cardinal that in when it comes to economic value, people obviously value things to varying degrees and their value is subjective to them and it's not cardinal. So like if I say to you, here's a Kit Kat, here's a Snickers, which one do you like more? You can answer that easily. You prefer one. It's like better than is sort of when you're thinking ordinal. This one's better than this one. If I say to you, how many utils does each one bring you? You know, how much better than? You can't put it, you can't say it's 1.5 better. You could say, well, yes. I would, in order to make me choose the Kit Kat over the Snickers, you would have to also throw in a cup of coffee. Okay. We're still not talking about quantifiable cardinal numbers. We're still talking rank order preferences. And like, that's how many of these things in economic exchanges work. We try to give them and dollars help make it appear. They trick us into thinking they're cardinal, but they're still not cardinal. It's like, I'm willing to part with this many dollars for this thing, given this certain circumstance, but really it's a rank order preference. In this moment, right. So, I prefer this to the dollars. I can't even tell you an exact quantifiable amount. It's just based on, compared to my alternatives.
Okay. There's going to be maybe dozens of you listening right now. The dozens of us that understand what Isaac just talked about is what's called the subjective theory of value. Right, Isaac? Is that fair enough statement?
Yeah.
Okay, so subjective theory of value. The subjective theory of value states in another frame, if you're an economist and you're in this new world, or if you're in go-to-market and you're in this new world, you try to sit back and you try to answer questions like, for this consumer, how much more does she want a watch than a pair of shoes? As the consumer, please tell me how you would quantify that. Okay. You can't, like, I have no, if you ask me that question and I am in the middle of a purchase decision, I cannot. Okay. Now let's abstract that to millions of people. That is proof, undeniable, that the subjective theory of value reigns true everywhere. And it's this ordinal scale of preference that at some points I'm preferring something over something else, and assigning a digit is not how I make my decision. So why would you model it from the perspective of a digit? It's inherently flawed.
I want to bring this back to a real world example because probably we might get a few more listens if they're going to talk about something I can relate to because it's not as complicated. So the real example is my own personal consulting trajectory. Okay, so for the longest time, I was a management consultant. The way you make money in management consulting is you work your network, you knock on the door, you say, hey, I helped you last month, can help you this month. Got really tired of that business. And I said, like, there's got to be a better way. So someone really smart, I think it was some guy on a podcast, like, I don't know, Jared, somebody, he was talking about the power of influence. And I was paying attention, like, what if I become like a really key thought leader? What if I do that? And so I dedicated myself to like putting hours and hours of time into creating frameworks and models and putting them out for free and giving them away to everybody. And something magical happened. My business flipped, and it went from me having to do outbound to everything being inbound. What happened is that because I gave everything away for free gifting, people started to trust me. Then I built relationships with people where they felt like he's not trying to get money from me. He just wants to help me out. And then they call me and ask for help. And something along that line is exactly what we're talking about here, right? From get to give. From transaction to relationship, from show me you can, the classic model for go-to-market has always been try to extract dollars, squeeze people through a funnel, and at the other end we'll squirt out their money and then toss the body. Something's happened where if we don't care about them, they're not even going to get into our funnel. If they don't trust us, they're not even going to get into our funnel. So somewhere along the lines, we need to bring into this conversation, what is the impact of giving? What is the impact of not worrying about the transaction? What is the impact of building deep, incisive relationships from which then they request from you your product versus you having to push it? This is not just a funnel conversation. This is a complete zeitgeist change. the
Yes.
conversation you had with Joe Rowley. This is what we have to start with this.
And it's,
Because if we don't start with this, we have a model that's no longer relevant because we got the wrong assumptions.
I love, Allan, something you said near the very beginning of the conversation, that the funnel, it's not just for customers, it's also internal. Like when you understand, you've got to orient your team around a different framework as well. I remember at the previous company I was talking about before, we would observe sometimes, all the time, customers or potential customers not following the way our funnel was set up. It's like, okay, you're supposed to have a pre-qualifying call with this person. And then once you're that interested, you'll download some guide or you'll apply. And then we'll do like a application review call, and then blah, blah, blah. And so we had these roles segmented out based on this pattern of behavior. Like this person doesn't need to be as qualified to take this phone call as this person further down the funnel does. They just need to do the minimum. The customers weren't following this pattern. So we kept trying to figure out how to get them to do what we wanted them to do, because that's how our team was structured. We don't want you to talk to the expensive employee first. Their time is worth more. We want you to talk to the cheap employee first. How can we force you to do what you don't want to do? Which is all wrong, right? And we finally just blew it up and we're like, this isn't working. We're removing any distinction between a employee who takes the entry level calls and the next. We're just everybody on the team. You talk to any customer that wants to talk to you. And we don't care if you call it an application interview or a pre-qual. We don't care what you call it. You get on the phone with them when they want to talk.
Funnel. You blew up your funnel.
We completely got rid of it and said, look, here's what's always worked. We put out content into the world, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles, podcasts, books, speaking at events. Like we just put it out all the time. We're always doing that. People love it. And somehow they end up wanting to talk to us or apply to our program. So we'll just take whatever. Sometimes they come on the site and download something if we want to put it on there. But what works best is if we just make everything 100% free and then have two options. You can apply or you can click that I want to talk to somebody. And people would do both. People would do one of them. They'd get on the phone and then they'd walk through the application while they were on the phone. Great. Let's do it that way. They would apply without ever wanting to talk to somebody sometimes. That's fine too. It was like, we just had to stop trying to fit them into a funnel. We literally actually ended up getting rid of our marketing automation software. We were so extreme, also because we lost the 90% first year discount that HubSpot offered. But it was like, we are trying to adapt our team to our tools and to our mental models rather than just responding to what our customers are telling us.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but you said something really important. You said, along the lines of my little story, you gave away a lot. You showed you cared. You put energy into the stuff that was free because you recognized that was going to be the basis for relationship building. That was going to be the basis for trust building. That was going to be the basis for inbounds that really matter. An inbound is not a BS little MQL if it's based on having someone digested hundreds of hours of your hard work that was given to them for free. That should be written down somewhere because it means that all marketing that's based on ads is BS. Because who cares about your damn ad? Because I don't care about you until you make me care about you. You want to care about me first. Then I'll care about you. And that inbound I'll bet you your inbound conversion rates were super high.
Oh, I mean, literally it was like when people came to us and booked a call or booked whatever, the conversion rate was off the charts. When we tried to create a broader, higher part of the funnel, those people were almost always worthless. But when we were just like, we're removing the whole top, there is no top of the funnel. There's just free stuff. And then you're applying to the program. That's it. Then it was like, it just worked better. It just worked better.
It's interesting. Back to something you said, Jared, I think was really important. You were talking about machines and how machines are a difficult metaphor to apply because ecosystems are much more heuristic. They're less about algorithms and they're more about interdynamics. And if you think about it from that context, the funnel is based on what I would call a fragmented view of the world. The world lives in ecosystems, and those ecosystems are integrated. And all the funnels that we work in are fragmented. And that fragmentation leads to really an incomplete picture. Your funnel that you talked about, Isaac, was an incomplete picture of the way that your customers wanted to operate. Your content was a complete picture. So you were actually putting out really integrated stuff, relationship, caring, and then trying to put people into a fragmented box. And all funnels, especially in an interconnected, interdynamic, world, are fragments of completeness. And if they're machines, they're components of machines. They're never the whole machine. And so it's like, this is why I think we need to bring the ecosystem influence in. We need to bring in an ecosystem funnel, because the world doesn't exist in these fragmented silos. And funnels are fragmented silos of one.
I love the idea, real quick, Jared. I love the idea of just thinking in terms of surrounding things rather than funneling things, right? Like I want to surround my ecosystem or my company. And I almost think in concentric circles. I'm huge on narratives because I think everything starts there for people. So like I think in 3 concentric circles, and each one has a narrative. The company circle, your internal organization, the company story is the narrative that draws. That's your why. That's your founding myth. This is the thing that we all believe. We all hold on to our company's story, right? The next concentric circle is your users, and that's your customer story. That's the story of how that's customer success. That's content. That's enablement content. That's telling the narrative and reinforcing to them how to succeed as customers and making them famous, promoting them when they do. And then the third concentric circle is for your total addressable market. And that's the category story. That's where you're telling the story of the category as a whole. And when you mess those around, when you try to tell your total market, your company story, you sound like a narcissist. They don't care, right? Right? It's like, that's for the team to rally around. And then you got your customer story, and then you got your category story. And you're thinking of like surrounding in these larger and larger circles, this whole ecosystem with a unifying story,
I love it. I love it.
I like that.
Allan, I love how you
I might challenge the second circle.
Yeah, and that could be wrong. That's very crude.
Actually, it might be customer, community, and partner circle, because increasingly it's very difficult to discern where a really close partner and where a customer are. It's kind of like we said, Jared, like when Benioff stood up and said partner love, partners, customers, and communities, employees. These are the 3 circles, and that the customer circle almost has centricity all the time, and maybe we need to balance it with something that's a little bit more, customer, community, partner, and then the category.
I'm going to end this episode with the title that I just came up with. I was just slacking this with Isaac. Allan, this was amazing. I geeked out and had so much fun here. Isaac, thank you. The title of this episode is going to be Fuck the Funnel, the Beginning of the End with Allan Adler. Well, I'll put the asterisk in there.
Sounds very not.
I'll put the asterisk
like
in there.
It sounds like and Mordor and like
No. It's the beginning of the end, which means we know that what happens in these moments of rebirth is something greater comes anew, right? Like I'm sorry to my friend Sangram from Terminus, who's a big friend of Jill Rowley. I think Jill was like a whole big section of his book where he said, flip my funnel. And I just don't want to flip the funnel. I think it's fucked. It's over. It's done. It's dead. And like Salesforce did to software with the big whoop and the cross through software, I think you're going to see some imagery from Partner Hacker that has the funnel with a big X through it. And it's not flip my funnel. It's fuck the funnel. So
no, it's going to be the middle finger emoji over a picture of the funnel.
The middle finger. No, I'm not kidding. And I'm sorry for speaking, the way that I feel, but I don't know any of you that's been doing this for a decade, like we have, like in living in this world, you're just tired of fighting this fight to no avail. And I want to stop operating from the old world paradigm. And I want to thank my friend Allan Adler for joining us today on PartnerUp and challenging that paradigm and prototyping out loud. Allan is one of the biggest figures in ecosystem movement and his framework and all of that. But there's also, you're like Socrates.
Oh, shit.
Just keep in mind, Allan, they did kill Socrates.
Jeez, Jared, what a way to end it, huh?
No. What I'm saying is you're controversial. Like you're poking the bear and the bear's a 10,000 pound gorilla. Like you're attacking something that needs to be attacked, and it is at the end. And what I want to do is I want to thank you, because it's not a hard thing, meaning for every 100 advocates that you're creating, you do also have 10, 20 people that hate you. Right. And I've seen it. I've seen people come out and attack you, and it's like, And what? Go back to the funnel? Like, just listen to the old world. Allan, thank you so much for coming on and geeking out with us and prototyping out loud and like putting your name out there.
Thank you, Jared.
This was a blast.
Thank you, Isaac. Pleasure, you guys. Take care.
Allan, thank you for crowning the first ever the three-peat guest on PartnerUp. Allan Adler, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Peace out, Partner Up.